Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Welcome back, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. We got some announcements here. Let's see. SANS Pentest Hackfest is happening November 13th through the 20th in Bethesda, Maryland. There will be a 2-day summit coupled with some awesome training, as well as Net Wars with Coinapalooza, one night of Cyber City, and a super secret challenge. You should check it out. SANS Pentest Hackfest Summit. Ed Scotus is the one who puts this on every year, and it's awesome, and we're going to be there. I will be presenting, and we're going to be doing stuff. We'll have a table and all kinds of stuff. You can save $300 off the 2-day Hackfest Summit by using the discount code HACKFEST17 at registration. You should check out the interview we did last night on Paul Security Weekly with Bryson from Grim, where we talked about the crossbow product. And I know you're like, oh, like a product pitch? Like, no, this is like one you have to check out. It's just awesome. And some seasoned veterans of Security Weekly were probing Bryson with questions, and I thought he had some great answers. So you definitely want to check that out. And domaintools.com/Security Weekly. We're doing a webcast, and actually Joff Thayer and myself are going to be presenting on doing IP address and domain name blacklisting. It's going to be a lot of fun. Joff, of course, is the author of an open source tool to enhance your domain name blocking. We're going to be talking about that and so much more in collaboration with Domain Tools. So make sure you check that out. Michael, what do we got for startup articles and discussion?
It's funny. Sometimes I feel like I keep saying this. Sometimes I plan these in advance, and sometimes I just pick stories that I like and I try to balance them out. And I'm looking at this week's and I'm saying, well, I see there's some trends here. When we get later into it, we'll look at some of these funding rounds, and some of these funding rounds now, like I feel like at times they're getting bigger. I'm not always convinced that's better. I think sometimes people get swept up in that. So let's start with the quickest way to estimate how much your startup needs to raise. You guys will notice if you follow along and you come check out our wiki and you look at the things that we put up on it. This is by Thomas Tungus. You know what? I should learn how to say his name. Thomas is. I'm loving his stuff. So he's a partner. He's done venture. He's done startups. He's done all this type of stuff, and it's really cool. So he's a very data-driven person, and that's one of the things that's interesting. They're short posts. They're well-written. So he said, okay, if you tell me 3 numbers, I can estimate the amount of capital your startup will need to raise. And he goes and he explains it in a couple others, and he's nailed it, like down to like a 3 to 5% variance, which is huge. Like that's tight. It's really good. 3 numbers: the startup revenue target. So what's your revenue target? The average revenue per customer, and the average cost of customer acquisition. Now, what's fascinating is, if you think about this, most of the startups that we talk to, and most of the startups that I've worked with, they got an idea on revenue target. And that's for any number of reasons, either because it sounds good or because you know what it's going to take to sustain or to grow. So revenue targets we get. Average revenue per customer. When I ask those people, go, I don't know. Yeah, you got to know.
Yeah,
you have to. I mean, is the average contract that you're selling $25,000? Is it $500,000? Is it $50,000? By the way, you need to know that for a couple reasons too, because what you need to start to get your head wrapped around is that a one-time shot, or what are they going to be per year? How long do they tend to stay with you? Now I get it. You're new. You're saying, Michael, I'm a startup. I'm brand new, and we haven't even made it out of year 1 yet. How am I going to know? You need to historically look at the marketplace. I mean, for the type of service that you're selling, is your anticipation that they're going to stay around, and that you have a different lifetime value for the customer than you do of an annual value for the customer. But even that, right? How does that work out? And then the average cost of customer acquisition. I see these numbers are all over the place.
Few people know that. I had the first 2 are on my radar, right? The third one, I'm like, well, I got to work on that. That's a hard one.
Now, the ones that I find who know this really well are those who offer a static product. It's either they're selling a book, or they're selling a subscription to something, or they're selling an information product. Yeah, and absolutely, yeah, perfect. And so I can go to Facebook. and Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter now, and you can work through the marketing enough and you can get it down. And I'll tell you what's always fascinating. They're selling, let's say, and I've done a bunch of these webinars where I've listened, and I love when they get down into the data and they'll say, okay, well, here's the thing. We're spending $1,000 a day on Facebook ads. And a lot of people are like, $1,000 a day, but they're selling enough stuff that they're making, $2,500. So they're up net $1,500 a day, and they know the cost of acquisition. And so they'll say, my cost of acquisition per person is $7. And now you might look at that and be like, $7 a person. Yeah, but they're selling a $100 product. That's a 7% cost. That's actually really good. And so we discount that stuff a lot. And this article doesn't go into it, but the fascinating part is, he basically said, yeah, but if you know that and you start to take a look at it, here you go. That's what it is. And he says, look, it's not perfect. And he said it doesn't consider how long you bootstrap, whether you collect cash up front, whether you execute growth consistently, or you have a period of correction. Great way to put that. And that's a really important thing, periods of correction. In fact, you know what? What's really cool, and this is coming to me as we're talking about it, we talk a lot about pivots. Sometimes there's a correction. A correction isn't a pivot. It's just a straightening out, right? It's figuring things out. So anyway, I think it's kind of interesting. That said, I thought it was pretty good. And he said, look, this isn't a financial model. You're trying to figure it out. So I think this is a data point that we're going to keep taking a look at. It's something that we're going to think about as we go. And I you know me, if we can reduce it down to 3 questions or 3 data points, and it gets us really close, I love that stuff. That's really awesome. All right, so on the same thing, and there's going to be one I want to point out in this. I'm curious. So it's a list of 10 things. It's 6 steps. Sorry, it's 9 out of 10 businesses fail within the first 3 years. Don't be one of them. So here's 6 steps to surviving the first 3 years. There's one in here I like the best. First thing it says, you got to have legs. Your product, your business, it's got to have legs. You got to have market knowledge. That's the one I think that's really important to me. Not knowing your market as well as it can be known is unprofitable. I think that's the best line in the whole thing. Knowledge is power. Markets make you money. So it's basically when you ask somebody, what you go to market, Paul, we rail on this all the time. If your Shark Tank market is, it's the whole world. Everybody needs this, right? They laugh at you. I happened to watch an episode of Shark Tank last night. I don't remember the episode. What I remember is the woman doing the pitch said, this was actually, I didn't pay as close attention to it as I'm thinking about what she said. Laid out the problem, laid out the value, but then she laid out the market. And she said, there are 49 other million Americans that are just like me trying to solve this problem. Totally told them what the market was and what she sold and how it worked and whatever else. It's a good way to do it. Understanding your market makes a lot of sense. Understanding their challenges. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and they said, well, what's the importance of understanding your market? I mean, like, it's security, right? Shouldn't they do it? And my argument was, it's not an argument. My point was, you need to understand the market well enough that you can educate your potential customers about it in a way that they didn't consider it, right? It's that lens. It's like we talk about value. Sometimes the value is, you have something to sell them. But you know what? I've come to understand this. It's taken me 15 years to figure out. You don't have anything to sell them. The best case is that you can elevate their current condition. And I don't mean that their condition is bad. It's just that they're here. They want to be here. If you can participate in that, then you're selling them. You're helping them get better. The thing then is that if you understand the market, if you understand the marketplace, you understand the forces at play, you understand the emotional aspects of it, and you can share that with somebody succinctly. It's buttoned up. You understand it. And they say, I didn't think of it that way. That makes so much sense. I'm doing that. Okay, cool. Yeah, so to me, I think knowing your market is really important. It talks about confidence. It talks about getting help, doing whatever it takes.
Yeah, I thought the other things were kind of just table stakes, really.
Yeah.
And nothing
do whatever it takes. Get up early. Work hard.
Kind of bullshit.
But the market knowledge one, to me, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Along market knowledge, Michael, like how much, and it's one of the things that I struggle with on a lot of different perspectives, right? But how do you know where your target market like hangs out? Like, how do you make your target market realize that you're the leader in a space? And I think part of that is like knowing where they hang out and what are the best ways to communicate with them. And sometimes that's not really that easy, right? I mean, in the case of where you're talking about you have a commodity product and you're using social media marketing, that's easy, right? But when you're like a B2B, I think that's a lot more difficult.
And your security startup's a lot tougher. I'll tell you, I think you asked two questions in there, and I would have two answers. The first of which is, you're right. You got to figure out where they go. And what I've done is, as I start getting folks that kind of match up, I say to them things like, do you go to conferences? What do you read? How do you get your information? How do you think about
That's right. We can just you can ask them.
What
That's
do you
great.
turn to?
That's a good point, Michael. And it's so obvious. Like, just ask them.
And then what I do is I look for the trends.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. People are happy to tell you.
Yeah.
Like, they're really happy to tell you. The second question was, how do you get them to know that you're the market leader? We've talked about this a little bit. There's a book out there called Play Bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can get Chris to come on the program.
I gotta read that. That's gonna be on my short list of.
It's
I just gotta go read that.
Phenomenal. It is one of my top. In fact, you know what, Paul? At some point before the year's over, I'll recap my top 3 to 5 books of the year. I've got a bunch that I've read for like personal growth and personal development. On the business front, Play Bigger. If you're in a startup, you need to go read Play Bigger. In fact, 3 books I would read today if you're in a startup. I'd go read Play Bigger.
And who's the author of that?
Then I would read Chris Lochhead. There's a couple others, but if you look for Chris Lochhead, Loch, it might be 2 H's. It's great. It completely changed the way you look at it, and I will not do it justice, but what it basically says is you have to design the category and then you execute against the category. So basically, instead of trying to compete against everybody else, just go create a new category. Now, is it easier said than done? I'll tell you what, self-serving, it matches up to a lot of what I do in Straight Talk. A lot of, especially Straight Talk and value proposition, being able to describe the problem, understand the problem, showing people that either there is a solution to a problem they thought was intractable, or that help them understand that they have a problem they didn't even realize, and then you can help them solve that problem. If you're the person who defines the category, you're the person who talks about the problem in a way that the people understand, not negative, not pushing them down in the dirt, but they kind of listen to it and they go, yeah, that's right. Tell me more. Yeah, good. Then you're onto it. I love that book. Next book I would read then is The Brain Audit. It was written in 2008 by Sean D'Souza. I've become basically a disciple of his, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in our show notes. But one of the things I love about this is this talks about the brain and how we make decisions, and he's basically broken it down into a series of steps. And it said, look, if you skip one of these steps or you go out of sequence, you're going to create a dissonance, or you're going to create an interrupt, and that increases risk, which means people aren't going to decide. And in this, I'm actually in the process of rereading it. I've purchased a lot of his materials and courses, and in fact, am incorporating a lot of that into the way that we're correcting for our business, right? We're not pivoting, but a lot of the correction that I'm going through right now is being driven by my analysis of those 2 books. So if you think about it, right, Lochhead and Play Bigger says set a big category. You want to be the category leader, then go be the category king by designing your own category. Now, you can't exist in it all by yourself, right? So take Elon Musk, for example. If Tesla existed only by itself and it was the only electric car maker, we could call it the category king, but it doesn't work. You need competition. And to wit, if people paid attention, he basically said, okay, all the patents we have, anybody can use them. I will not enforce the patents. He essentially ripped them up and said, here you go, compete, let's go. Come on, let's do it. Let's get this on, because he needs that. Now, he was the first one there. He's defined it. He's going after it. I suspect he's likely to retain his status as category king, and not for perpetuity. You can lose it, but he's making moves that I think keep him in that particular category. When you get to Brain Audit's going to say, when you understand the people who are in your category and what they want. So this is that other part of your question, Paul. Where do they go? What are they doing? How do they do it? Brain Audit's going to show you how to use the language that matters to them to elevate stuff in their brain. This is why I always talk about, you need to be able, right, when we say what problem you're trying to solve, if you're doing this as part of your value proposition, you need to be able to isolate, elevate that problem into a question set. When you can ask that as a question, the brain, if that's a problem that somebody actually has, it locks on. It's almost something we can't control.
And the Brain Audit, I'm sorry, the Brain Audit is Sean D'Souza?
Yep, Sean D'Souza.
Got it.
It's a great book. Like I've read it twice and I'm rereading it now. And every time I read it, I get a little smarter about it. And like now I'm really trying to understand it with my business. And it's really powerful. So that's going to help you when you get down to understanding who your target profile is, who you serve, who you can help, and how to help guide them through that process. Third book I would put in that list then. Now, there's some others that I really enjoy, but the third book in that trio is called Never Split the Difference. This is by Chris Voss, V-O-S-S, former FBI hostage negotiator. And Chris Voss really breaks down negotiation. So the classic is Getting to Yes, right? And there's a lot of other books on negotiation. And he basically says, yeah, they're all kind of good, but let's throw those out the window. The book is exceptionally well written. It's got great stories in it. And other people go, oh, this is like if I'm trying to negotiate for hostages. Yeah, nope, it works really well. He talks a lot about tactical empathy and how to get down to what somebody else wants and how to understand those needs and how to elevate them, how to get past some of the false fronts and the false no's, and really get down to where you're helping the other person get what they want so that you can get what you want, right? And the Zig Ziglar quote is one of my favorite quotes from Zig Ziglar. You get anything in life you want as long as you help enough other people in life get what they want.
Right.
So if you think about that, right, Lockheed's going to say, how do you go design a category? How do you fall in love with the problem publicly? How do you get people excited about what you're able to do? Brain Audit says when they're excited, the people that are excited, how do you get them from, yeah, it sounds interesting to, dude, we've got to work together. And then the Chris Voss is, for me, it's the one-to-one. When I'm talking to a specific person, what is it that they need to know from me? What do I need to know from them? How do I get them to that place where they say, great, here's the PO. Here's my money. Let's go do it. And I don't mean any of this is a trick. None of it's a trick. It's all about understanding brain science and understanding how this type of stuff works. And so that's kind of the answers to it. So, we'll still go over these lists of 6 really cool things to do, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is, if you can take and act on those 3 books, and those 3 books work together. And for me, it's actually been kind of fun because I see now how some of the stuff I've started with Straight Talk comes together. And it's given me some ideas on ways to do some stuff differently in that. And those updates are coming. I promise. I haven't talked about them for a while, but those updates from me are coming. And I think that creates some exciting stuff. So I think if you can start to figure those things out, that's how you can elevate your message. That's how you can be seen. That's how you can get the attention. And by having those conversations and creating information that way, Paul, people will share it. They get excited about it. And then when you get to those one-to-one conversations, you can negotiate out value, right? All value is negotiated. So if you understand how to negotiate better and you understand value better, then you can negotiate better value for everybody. It's not one-sided. It's good stuff. So
Michael, what about this CEO's keeping your priorities straight as a CEO?
As you can imagine, this has been one of the things that I've been on. I think, I've kind of shared coyly. I've been on a bit of an awakening on a personal front and on a business front, and it's been interesting. And at some point, I do hope I'll write and share more about it. It's good. It's interesting. I've talked about it, like kind of tipping into the fire a little bit. And the reason I'm sharing this much is a lot of you have been very generous in writing to me about how me sharing my journey, Paul, you sharing your journey is helping each of you on your journeys, whether you're in the corporate environment or you're in a startup or you're somewhere in between. And so I tend to honor that. So one of the things that I've learned is that it's really important to keep your priorities straight. And in fact, as you and I have already said on this show, right, you've got 3 kids, I've got 4. We run businesses. We try to do things that support the industry, etc. Bluntly, it's really easy to lose sight of your priorities. It's really easy to lose sight of your focus. And that's some of what I've kind of figured out in the last couple of months. And so I saw this. I thought it was kind of interesting, right? You have to benefit. Everything you do has to benefit somebody, but not necessarily equally. And so basically what happens is the guy said, okay, look, you can't please everybody. You got customers, you might have shareholders or investors, you've got employees, and you've got all this type of stuff. So how do you do it? And the guy said, look, I came down. I called it a stakeholder list. I called it a loyalty list. And I basically figured out who I benefit and how to do it. Now, what's interesting is he says, his order, it's customers come first, employees come second, the local community comes third, and the investors come fourth. Now, I've shared this out, and a couple of people chimed in, and they said, wow, this is great. And by the way, this would work for your household as well. And I'm going to tell you equivocally, yes. And what I would tell you is on a personal level, what Trish and I figured out is that we come first. The 2 of us, and we actually now have created a lot of time and got back to some of the rituals. If you have kids at home, if you think about this, before kids, you did things together. Then you started having kids. And if you had 1, maybe you didn't spend you spend some time together. Now you got 2. Paul, you know what it's like making a transition from 2 to 3. I'll tell you, 3 to 4 wasn't much harder, right? 2 to 3 is really where you start to feel a lot of those differences. And we kind of woke up and went, wow, we're not doing a lot of the things we used to do. Let's get back to that. So I see that. I see how this type of approach works. Now, some people come back to me and they said investors are fourth. That's nuts. You can't do that. You got to meet their needs first. I didn't argue the point on social media. Here's my argument back to it, though. No, they're not, because they're investing in you to have a return. You have a return if you've served your customers. Now, in all fairness, I actually might put employees before customers on a simple premise that if you elevate and serve your employees, they understand that the purpose of the business. Exactly right. Is to serve the customers. But, I think it's good. I love the idea of serving the local community. I think if you're in the security industry, I think you can serve the security community and or the industry and be good with it. My belief is if you do it this way, then your investors will get what they want. They'll be happy. And what you want are investors that are happy. Now, does this mean you have to be willing to sometimes tell them no? Yeah, it does.
Well,
is that easy to do? No. But that may mean then that you didn't choose the right investors when you did that. And so when we talk about making your choices and stuff, I think that comes in. So anyway, I thought it was important to think about some of this differently.
You may also have to tell your customers and employees no as well. And that's part of the whole relationship building between both employees and customers, which I think is important,
Yeah, and if you remember an interview we had a couple weeks ago where we looked at improv, I mean, you can say no by saying yes. That's the real oddity to it all, right? Because we get nervous. It's funny. We get nervous about saying no to somebody that we think is going to give us money, and then we get worried about saying no because I'm not pan out the right way. First of all, if you run a business and somebody's asking you to do something that's not in the core of your business, you're dead rights to say no. But also, you can also say to somebody, yeah, you know what, we might be able to do that, or we can do that, but it doesn't make sense at this time, or yeah, we can do that, and this is what it would take, or this is what it would cost, or these are the trade-offs, and let them make an informed decision on it. So anyway, I thought this was useful because I think this type of stuff matters to me. I'm going to jump to this other one then, because I threw this one in today, and I thought it was really interesting in the way it came together. So the title is, "This is the contract my wife and I wrote to protect our work-life balance." Now, I think this is so smart, and I'm going to find the line that I thought was really smart. There you go. Most of us have contracts with our employers, but few of us have contracts with our partners. And I think it was really interesting because what the story that sets this up basically said, I was in line for a promotion. I applied for the promotion, and they offered it to me. And I went to my mentor, and I said, wow, this is awesome. And he said, cool, are you going to accept it? And I said, well, yeah, why wouldn't I? And he said, well, because it's going to change your life. And you got to think about if that works or not. And if it works for you, then does it also work for your partner's work at home? And so they talk about, negotiating or thinking about nights away and ways you were going to do stuff and having family days and nights out. What I will share, what's kind of interesting right now, I've already told everybody, right? Trisha's a partner in the business, has always been, at times maybe more silent than either of us would like. But now, right, sits next to me, whiteboards ideas with me, it does the workshops with me, and it's great to have that back in the business. So what we've looked at is, what does that operating agreement look like with the family? I'll tell you right now, Friday nights are family time, Sunday mornings are family time, Saturday morning is Michael and Trisha time. And what we're working with the kids are some things that they can do by themselves for the first couple hours of Saturday. And we basically lock ourselves in our room and just kind of hang out. Like, it's stupid stuff too. Like, sometimes we just watch TV, but it's time. It's just the two of us. We can talk. We can watch TV. We can play. We got some rituals.
Michael, is your youngest going to school? Did you say? Is that your youngest?
Yeah. No. Our youngest just turned 3 yesterday. Okay. So we have one starting high school and one starting kindergarten and one in between. So we have 3 kids in 3 different schools.
Wow.
And for us, first time we're really doing public school, and excited about it, nervous for them and excited about it. It's a change for all of us. And so it's interesting. And then of course we've got kids that are in the arts. So we've got dancers and artists and gymnasts. And so it's been really interesting for us to say, okay, as a family, then what are the things that are important, right? So for example, we can't do a family dinner every single night. It just time-wise doesn't work out.
You can't, yeah.
And now our morning schedules get a little nuts. So what we've decided is, okay, Friday nights are a time to come together and play a little bit. Saturday afternoons are a time. We do our meal planning. We do our shopping. We figure all those things out. And then Sundays, we play in the morning on Sundays. And in fairness, we like football in this house. So, Saturday afternoons and evenings for us are going to turn into football time. And Sunday afternoons, definitely, right, NFL football. So we'll still, and there's some stuff we can do locally or within a quick drive that we get that time as a family, and we're helping everybody else carve out their times. We're coming up with new routines and rituals. It's been fascinating. It's a work in progress. So I really liked this. Whether and I would say if you're in a startup or you're a leader, you're in a leadership position in your organization, I'd ask your team about this. I would say, hey, what does your contract at home look like? And frankly, if you want to be a better leader, help them develop these things and then understand where some of their boundaries are, and don't push them over them. Help elevate your people, and that means keep them happy at home and keep them happy in their lives. And if they don't want to work Saturdays, then don't freaking ask them to work Saturdays, and don't give them stuff to do on the weekends. Recognize Monday is going to be fine, and it's still going to be there.
Right.
So anyway, this spoke to me just based on where I was at, but I thought it was really interesting. Last one for this week. I really liked this. Documenting your failures. We've talked about this for the last year on the show. right? Should you fail often? Should you fail fast? Should you be public about your failures? Should you hide your failures? Look, I'll be candid. As I'm going through things, I've realized that I have joked from time to time over the last 15 years that I have gone from success to failures. And I think it was Churchill or somebody else that said, like, the mark of success is moving from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm. I'm sure I paraphrased it incorrectly, but I kind of like it. What I'm starting to realize now is that I've been candid about a lot of failures, but I've swept others under the rug for a variety of reasons. But this line in this I really liked. It was an Ellen DeGeneres quote. It's failure that gives you the proper perspective on success. And so the idea here is don't navel gaze your failures. Don't use your failures to throw yourself into a depression and beat yourself up. Look at your failures for what they were. Now, what's fascinating is I actually have a model that I built about almost 10 years ago called the Human Paradox Gap. And it's fascinating to me because the work I've done in the last 2 years, I re-examined that model about 30 or 40 days ago. It was like light bulbs going off. It was close. It's not inaccurate, but I can add better stuff to it now. And looking at some of this failure, one of the things it says here, right? So Stephen Covey once said, "I'm not a product of my circumstances. I'm a product of my decisions." When we make decisions, we set intentions. When we have intentions create outcomes. Outcomes can be positive or negative or neutral, and then they have impacts. So you have outcomes or consequences, and you have impacts. And what I figured out in this model is you have to sort those out. What I've figured out in the intervening years is that's actually more complex and simpler than I was treating it. And so I'll tell you what I loved about this, and I do this, what worked, what didn't, can you determine why? I'll tell you, when I help people evaluate stuff, I usually start with what worked. Mm-hmm. Here's why. It's so quick to focus on the negative. Mm-hmm. The first thing you need to do is tell me what worked. Then, of course, tell me what didn't work. Now, when I like this, can you determine why question. So I'm going to go reevaluate some of the stuff I do. But the other question I ask is, what else comes to mind? Now that you've looked at what worked, what didn't, there's something popping in your head, write it down, capture it, run with it, go with it.
It reminds me of a Thomas Edison quote that I saw where he says, I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And then he says, many of life's failures are people who didn't realize how close they were to success when they gave up. I thought it was pretty... That's right up there with the Churchill quote, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? And we sometimes lose perspective on something. It's actually kind of fascinating. I shared with a friend the other day some stuff that I've realized about myself, and I'm not ready to talk about it broadly, other than to say I can now admit that I've been a pretty interesting depression for a long time. And he had some really interesting insights about what I was able to do in that, and it completely reframed my perspective on stuff. And it was like, oh, that's really interesting. So I think it's good to take a look at failure for the sake of learning from it, not for the sake of beating yourself up. And I think it's worth spending some time documenting it and saying, but what worked? But what did I do well? What, and the only thing I put that this doesn't capture as well is, what was your intention? When you made the decision with the information you had, that's the other thing, with the information you had then, in the context that you were in, what was your intention and how did it work out? Okay, and what did you learn from it? Because a lot of times we look at what we know now. Well, with what I know now, I'd probably make a different decision. That's not fair to yourself. You need to kind of work those things out a little bit. But so this was like a big week of introspection and looking at stuff and understanding, right? This is a big week of understanding, but I like it. I think it's important. And I find, frankly, a lot of people struggle when it comes to some of these questions, and I wish they wouldn't. So
let's
cover. Any other thoughts, or you want to talk about some of the security stuff?
Yeah, let's cover some of the security. Well, two security companies we got. They got some funding. One a Series A, one a Series B.
Yeah, it wasn't a big week in terms of announcements and things happening, right? I mean, we've had some weeks where it's like we need an hour to go through everything. Two big ones this week. Dragos, they raised $10 million in a Series A. And what's interesting is, and I've got to do this from memory. Let me see if I can pull it up. I'm actually pretty sure that Mike Jenke is part of the group that got Dragos started. So like we're seeing the themes and he's doing a lot of great stuff in the security space. So Dragos, they're basically playing in the ICS space, right? Industrial control systems. They're doing a lot of stuff in the energy space. They're building a platform. They're trying to look at ways to do stuff differently. So they got a $10 million Series A. So they got $1.2 million in the fall. And now not quite a year later, they got a $10 million Series A. For a Series A, that's really big. They're going after a huge space. There's a ton happening in the energy sector right now. There's a ton of interest on the energy sector. There's a ton of interest on ICS security. So it seems intelligent to me I don't know. I think it's Rob Lee, right? So
Yep.
I don't know Rob personally. Do you
John,
know Rob?
I believe John Strand does, and talked about Dragos on a show this week or last week, and was singing
All
his
right.
praises. So there's some validation
All right,
for you.
so we got to pull Rob on, and we'll have a chat with him about how this goes. I mean, it's a good raise, and I'm starting to look at, like I said, the folks involved in it are all doing really cool stuff. So it's pretty exciting. The other one, Zingbox, $22 million Series B. So it's papered as a Series B. I was not able to find information on their A or seed or any other rounds or equity rounds. $22 million for Series B is huge raise for a B, which means they're probably moving out of early stage and into later stage in terms just based purely on the size of that. Now, what that would mean typically, and again, I don't have a lot of details on this, but there's a couple of things I think are interesting. It's not just the size of the raise that matters, right? Because depending on what you're trying to get accomplished, or who you're going after, or how it's going to work, or the problems you're trying to solve are going to drive, right? We gave you the Tomas stuff earlier today. If you can answer these 3 questions, some people need to raise $100 million, and so they go do $100 million. When we look at early stage versus later stage, though, one of the things at early stage is you're trying to get your team figured out. You're trying to get your product market fit figured out. You're trying to get your unit economics figured out. So you may not have answers to all of those questions, but you're trending in that right direction. And that's where we tend to see stuff closer in that $5 to $10 million range for a founding round. So a B round can still be an early stage company, but a $22 million raise in a Series B is a little bit bigger. Now, that said, they're going after IoT, and they're specifically going after IoT security. Now, they mentioned all the buzzwords. They have machine learning and using data science and autonomy and all sorts of other stuff. To be fair, if they're using it properly, that's probably at some level what we need. But what stuck out to me was the lead investor, was Dell Technologies Capital. Now, I know Dell spun a lot of stuff off in recent years, and they go in different ways. But I'm really curious to see then if this isn't an opportunity for Dell to either have a solution in its stable, right? Because what we've talked about frequently now is that the R&D side of this is off book. This is on spec R&D. So this is kind of an interesting thing now. We're going to start to see, right? Because we've seen Symantec's got their fund, Trend Micro's got their fund, Palo Alto's got their fund, Dell Technologies has their fund. There's more, but like, the big folks now and big names in security and technology all have like $100 million funds or bigger, and they're actively investing in these types of technologies. Now, this is a big raise, but Dell's a big company, so that's not surprising to me. So I thought that was interesting. I think it's interesting because they're IoT software looking at security. There's a huge name that's played in these types of spaces that's made a big raise on them. So I thought it was interesting. Dragos is really cool, so we'll try to get Rob on the show. Zingbox, I don't know much about them. Like I actually
We actually talked about them last week. Matt Alderman definitely met with them. He might have even done some work with them as well. So we covered them last week. Interesting company.
Very cool. The one more thing, and I didn't expect to miss last week's show, and I always love it when Matt's on. But I threw some stuff in the show notes. The Brain Alchemy course for free. So I waxed poetic about Sean D'Souza and the Brain Audit. If that's something you're interested in, if you go back to our show notes for last week, in fact, I'll copy them forward to this week's show notes as well. If you go to Psychotactics, that's his website, .com/BAM, BAM, he's got the Brain Alchemy course, and he's offering it for free. This is something he's trying out. And what I found is he gives quality stuff away. So it's no trick. And I've downloaded it and I'm working through it. So those of you in Startup Land, I've actually shared it with some of you if you've already reached out to me. What he talks about is, how do you put this together? How do you think about your business in terms of services, products, or training, and then leverage? How do you create leverage? And how do you then structure your business so it works? And it works for a solo entrepreneur. It works for a small team. It works for a big team. And I'm actually willing to bet it works if you're in the security space today and you're in the enterprise and you're saying, I don't have enough people. I can't support everybody. We're a team of 6. We've got 2,500 employees. I'm willing to bet if you go read this, it'll help you understand where and how you can provide consulting and services, where and how you can provide training and support, and then how you can create products and how you can create stuff that make it easier for other people. And here's the real key. You want them to want it. You want to go solve their problems because you understand them really well. For free, I think you'd be silly not to go do this. And all I ask is that if you do it and you enjoy it, just tell Sean that I sent you. He's delightful to talk to. His wife is delightful to talk to. They live in New Zealand, and I hope at some point if they come stateside, I'm going to get a chance to meet them. But until then, do let him know that I've enjoyed his work, and I've enjoyed that he shares it, and he shares it so freely. And so I think that you'll enjoy it. And it's one of those things that if you're in a startup today, you think you want to be in a startup today, you're just trying to figure out how the hell you can scale in your current business. Go check this out. I think it's awesome.
Sweet. How's your journey?
Yeah. It's been good. Like I said, I'm in that period of correction. I've taken some time this summer to focus on myself and my relationships and my family and life, and it's been remarkable. And I'm really enjoying it. Now we're kind of getting down to business. So we got some stuff we'll be announcing. A couple folks have reached out for some coaching, and actually we're going to start offering that. So I'm getting some of those things figured out. I'm better understanding how to make it all work. Trisha's rejoined the company, so we're kind of figuring that out. I am full of optimism and excitement right now. So it's a good time. How about you guys? What are you guys working on?
We are product testing. Turns out math is hard sometimes. Got to make sure the math is right before you bring the product to market. So we're working on that, as well as planning an announcement for Wild West Hackin' Fest to spread the word about the product and kind of use that event to make some kind of formal announcement. So stay tuned for more information on that front. Yeah, it's exciting.
Short advice: read, play bigger. Read, play bigger in the next couple of weeks. Just
I'm going to
skim the titles, and we can talk about it. I think you'll pick up some tips in that will really benefit you at Wild West Hackin' Fest. So that'll be fun. That's awesome.
Awesome.
Good stuff.
Awesome.
Right,
well, thanks, Michael, and thank you everyone for listening and watching this episode of Startup Security Weekly. See everyone next time.